All right, welcome everyone to the next episode of the Jay Davis Show. I'm super excited to talk to Al Buford, our guest for today. And we're going to have a lot of great conversations around startups and how to get things going and risk taking, and even probably dive into some of the intricacies of government work, government contracts, all of that fun stuff. So welcome, Al. Hopefully I said your last name correctly
You
too.
sure did. Yeah. Thanks,
Okay,
Jay.
good. Awesome. Well, thank you for coming. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Well, our mutual friend Jess Larson hooked this all up.
Yeah, thanks to Jess. Well,
Yeah.
why don't we start out? If you want to just kind of jump in, tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Patriot Group, and kind of start there with just an introduction.
Sure. I served in the Army for 20 years within the Ranger Regiment and Special Operations. And my two business partners, Greg Craddock and Rob Whitfield, are also military veterans. I met Greg in 3rd Ranger Battalion in the early 90s. And Rob Whitfield was a Marine Scout Sniper and Scout Sniper instructor. And both had been contractors, and Greg had been a government employee for a while. And we were all working in industry. And within our space of overseas high threat protection, which is kind of how we started, and that's a lot of our backgrounds. There were some companies that weren't treating some of the guys very well, and there were some companies that were doing a little better job. And we just felt like, man, if we just focus on the customer's mission, and if we just lead in a real positive way and take good care of folks, we'll develop a good reputation over time, and we'll start to collect a lot of the best talent. Because a lot of the companies that had been acquired by private equity, they were more concerned about buffing up the spreadsheet and selling it in 3 or 4 years than they were about the culture of the company and the people and focusing on the mission. And so, we're just like the guys who deploy. We carried a rifle and we wore the body armor and we've been to all those places, and so we lead the company in a way that they would lead if they were in charge. We're just like them. And so we have that credibility to talk to them about the mission and about the customers and about mission focus, respect. Those are sort of our core tenets. And I beat that drum quite a bit on our deployment briefings, and it has helped us a lot.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I have a bunch of questions that kind of leads to, but kind of probably the first thing I wanted to ask about. I've been lucky to meet a lot of great veterans who are great entrepreneurs who've started amazing businesses. Do you think there is something in military culture that encourages entrepreneurship? Do you think that that's a rare skill, or is that common? I've run into a lot of great vets running startups, but maybe that's just the crowd that I'm in. Would love to hear kind of your thoughts about that.
Yeah, well, I think it really depends on what part of the military you're in. If you're
Yeah,
if you're in a particularly regimented, large, we call it big army, big green army,
yeah,
um, there's a lot of aversion to risk and thinking outside the box. But within the special operations community, that's exactly the kind of people they select, and that's exactly the way that they solve problems. Is
yeah,
to think outside the box and to take risks. You take in as much information as you can, and you have to start working on what they call the 80% solution. And you want to start moving forward before you have perfect information. And you look at the risks, you look at the potential ability to set the conditions for your own success, and then execute vigorously and refine your plan on the fly. Pivot sometimes when you need to. Execute your contingency plans when you need to. And that's the same thing as business.
yeah,
Yeah. And so, it just usually from a business perspective, it's more financial risk than it is personal safety risk. That's
yeah,
one of the big differences.
yeah. No, that's so interesting you say that, because the second you started making that difference, I'm like, oh yeah, it's true. Almost every entrepreneur I know was Navy SEALs, Rangers, Green Beret. It's those
Yeah.
guys, not usually the bigger army kind of people. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. Diving in a little bit more into what you just said about that 80%, working on that plan. What was that like for you guys? I think that's we were talking about this before we started. That's one of the questions I get all the time from friends and people who want to start a business. I think they struggle with that. I think they have a challenge with that. Can you explain a little bit about how you guys got started, and how you kind of overcame that natural hesitation, to be afraid of the unknown and the ambiguous?
Well, you have to be solving some kind of a problem or providing some kind of an improvement or benefit, to start a business to begin with. And in our case, we weren't developing products. We were going into the services sector. The barriers to entry in some respects are a little bit lower than maybe setting up manufacturing or, building software or whatever. And so we felt like our backgrounds would be credible within this space, and with some of the specific government customers we were targeting. And so we just felt like we knew enough about running projects in that space that we don't know much about M&A. That's not our background. So we didn't really follow that strategy. We followed an organic growth strategy within the services sector, within primarily government contracting. And those are all three things we had experience with. So we felt like if we just focused on the customer's missions, and we treated all of our folks with respect, and we attracted people who were like-minded, and those folks who maybe if we won a contract that had incumbent personnel and some of those people couldn't get on to that mindset of mission focus and respect, well, they would end up having to go away eventually. Ultimately, that methodology worked for us, and we're continuing to grow, and growing into the commercial space a little bit. And so that's kind of how we got going. It's just a belief in doing it right. I'll give you an example. People talk about corporate social responsibility. We're going to hire somebody, and they're going to be in charge of our CSR programs, and they're going to go out there and do good deeds in the community, and on, whatever that looks like in your space. And our idea is the best possible thing you can do to be socially responsible is to create an environment where people feel like they're a valued member of a great team with an important mission. And if you can put those three things together, it's a pretty magical slice of time in your life. And I can think about specific teams I was on where it was like that for me. And so to me, that's corporate social responsibility. It's not going out to try to save the manatee as a side project,
I think that's a great point. I think that's really interesting. As you guys started to do that, were those ideas fully fleshed out? Was there an aha moment of, running into kind of the bad example of how you didn't think this should be done? What was kind of that spark that got you guys started, and how did you kind of flesh out that vision over time?
Well, the pain point was within our space. A lot of our friends were working with different companies, and I won't name the company, but they had a bunch of people killed overseas, and they weren't even going to the funerals, and they were making a lot of money. And I was like, man, I know we can do it better than that. And so, and so that was just an example of the bad. The good really just had to do with the kinds of leaders that we were all raised by, who treated us well and treated us like we belonged and made us feel like we were valued members. Again, valued member of a great team with an important mission. If you can put those three things together, it's magical. I love being a part of a company where all of us, the owners, are in sync about that. And it feels good. We've got the same three partners since we've been in business in August of 2009. Same partners still own the business. And it's, three guys staring at a blank whiteboard to about 400 people, who deploy overseas and some domestic and do this kind of work. Yeah,
I love that. I think that's such an interesting part of entrepreneurship, is that friction. Whatever it is, there was that emotional friction for you guys of like, hey, these people deserve more from a company that is being paid very well. They can at least show up to a funeral. That's really fascinating. Well, you mentioned your partners. I'd love to hear. I think anyone. So often in entrepreneurship, we talk so much about just ideation and coming up with an idea. And I just was talking to a friend yesterday who's running a business that's doing very well and growing, and they've hired 30 people in the past 6 months, and now he's dealing with that, partners and how to work together, and now you're in this much longer, yeah, we got an idea that's working, and people are interested in it, people are willing to pay money for it, and now we got to think about how to build a great team and how to be
Mm-hmm.
good partners to each other and make a lasting relationship. What could you share with people as or who are maybe in that spot where they're trying to improve their team relationship, team camaraderie? What are some of the lessons you've learned of 13 years of being partners with the same three of you together?
Well, one of them is Jess Larson introduced me to the Arbinger material, Leadership and
Yeah.
Self-Deception and the Outward
Yep.
Mindset. And I liked it so much that I went to their Outward Mindset seminar, and then I went to their facilitator seminar. And that is the foundation of the humanistic approach. How we teach mission, focus, and respect is the language of Arbinger, of the Outward Mindset. And so it's just a way to teach how to see people and how to help things go right and spend less time dealing with things that go wrong. And so that's a core part of everybody in our company gets the book Leadership and Self-Deception, and also
Yeah.
the Outward Mindset book. And all of our leaders, they receive training on that. And we have feedback loop, which is we have surveys that go out, and we have after action reviews for when our folks come back from a deployment. We talk about what went right and what needs to be improved, anything within our ability to influence. We talk a lot about, I'll ask the guys, we're sitting in a room prior to deployment, and I'll say, hey, somebody tell me about the best team you've ever been on in your life and why it was that way. And it can be anything. It can be sports, it can be military, it can be contractor. And some guy will talk about the state championship football team he was on, and some guy will talk about his time in the Marines in Iraq and his first group that he was with, his first team, and why it was the best experience for him. And it's usually a whole lot about trust and everybody having each other's backs and everybody being focused on the mission, and nobody was selfish. Everybody was in it for the team and something bigger than themselves. And so, and then after we talk about those great experiences, and I just sort of reiterate, that's exactly what we're going for here every single time you guys
Yeah.
go out the door, is to recreate that. And I'll give you an example. There was a guy that worked with a previous company I was with. He had been a Marine for 6 years, and then he spent 7 years as a 747 pilot, accident-free 747 pilot. And then he left that to go on a contract to serve on the Karzai protection detail in Afghanistan when DynCorp had that contract. And I was calling him to talk to him about coming to the other company I was with, and I wanted to ask him that question. Hey, I see on your resume that you were a 747 pilot. Why did you leave that and go to the Karzai detail to be in Afghanistan? And he said, because I missed being on a team that much.
Yeah. That's crazy.
That says a lot.
I think it's something especially nowadays, we've lost some of that as we've sought after a lot of individual, even social media, I think, has exacerbated that of everything is individual and individual kind of fame and glory and those kind of things.
Well, and I
and I
think
noticed that.
I think social media brings out the worst in people too, because the algorithms inflame. They get a lot more. It's the whole clickbait thing. The more, if it bleeds, it leads from the news, in the 70s or whatever. Well, that's social media on steroids. The worse it is, the louder it's going to become in social media, and it brings out the worst in people.
Yeah. No, I think it's really interesting. And I think that that's something we all are seeking, is that great team kind of camaraderie. So that's really interesting. As you've developed this culture, what have been some of the pressures that you guys have had to avoid, or what are ways that you've maintained that culture and made sure that that's core to what you are? I think that's one of the things as an entrepreneur that's really challenging. You bring in new people, you grow, you have more people adding, and it's really hard to kind of keep true to that that culture that once was you and two partners
Yeah.
in front of a whiteboard. How do you maintain that as you scale?
Well, I think part of it is leading by example. No task is beneath any of us.
Yeah.
I will take out trash. I will go on to the range with our guys when we have instructors for that kind of stuff. But I'll go out and I'll shoot with them, and I'll clean weapons with them, and pick up brass or carry ammunition or whatever needs to get done. And when they see there's PT tests and things like that, I go do those PT tests with the guys sometimes. Just to be present and to show up and to show that none of this is beneath any of us. And so if I'm willing to carry heavy boxes, they should be willing to carry heavy boxes.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. Another part of it is letting them know what right looks like through example and training. And then when someone isn't having feedback mechanisms to monitor our leadership and our teammates, and if someone isn't living up to mission focus and respect, how can we look into the root cause and maybe help counsel them and coach them into being what they need to be to stay on this team? And if they're not willing or able to do that for whatever reason, then they don't get to stay on this team because it's like triage. You have to do the most good for the most people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a hard thing to stay true to. It's a real challenge, I think, as you build startups. It's easy to just say, well, let's give them another chance, and that becomes 5 chances and 10 chances, and yeah.
I'll give an example. Well, we had a guy who our back office is about 50% women. HR, accounting, all kinds of various functions, right? And this one guy, he just had this thing about women in the workplace, and he felt like women should be home having babies and all this stuff. And he was kind of vocal about that. And he was a decent, project management level guy in terms of his job. But basically the 3 partners, we just called him in and sat him down and said, look, your values are very different from our values, and those aren't going to change. And so you're just going to have to go work somewhere else. That's all there is to it. Yeah. He's like, yeah, but I'm doing a good job. I'm like, you're fine at your project management role, but you're souring the entire workforce in our back office, and that's not healthy, and you're going to have to go. And so that's it. We have a non-disparage policy, and so we're not going to. Your career is yours to go make. We're not going to go hurt that. And so that's just an example. You have to walk the talk, and that means getting rid of people who cannot be mission focused and respectful.
I know a lot of people struggle with it, and we've run into that issue where you have someone who's a high performer or doing a good job, but is a toxic personality, and those people just bring everybody down. It's a cancer that spreads very quickly. So. Yeah. Yeah. So I'd love to ask you, one of the things I love asking people, because we have a lot of people who listen who want to start a business. You have a friend who comes to you who's like, I've got this great idea. I get a lot of these. I have a lunch probably once or twice a week of like, hey, I want to pick your brain. What is like your 2 or 3 pieces of advice for the person who comes to you and says, I've got this great idea. What should I do?
I would say the first thing you need to do is make sure you have about 6 months or a year of savings, or maybe 18 months, depending on how complex your idea is. Yeah. And find some partners who are good at the parts of the business that you're not going to be good at based on attributes. Yeah. Are you going to be the sales guy and they're going to be the accounting person and somebody else is going to handle operations? Which piece of it do you do? Are you the guy that does the software engineering and somebody else is going to have to run the back office and do sales and HR and all that? So, but no one person can do it. So you have to put together a team of 2 or 3, 4 or 5 people, maybe a couple of investors. And I would say read Peter Thiel's 0 to 1. And and
great book.
Oh yeah, and read Grant Cardone Closer Survival Guide for sales. If it's a simple sale, if it's complex, read Mahan Khalsa, Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play. And understand what kind of sales cycles you're going to be in, and then study that.
That is great advice. As you've looked at, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes I notice is people starting companies, with two people because they're like, well, we're all friends and we were all in the room when we talked about the
Right.
idea, and
Right.
there's very little time spent being like, well, this person is good at this and I'm good at this and this person's good
Right.
at that. So
Well,
I think that is very true and is something people struggle with.
yeah, and there's a couple more aspects to it. Technical skills. That's something a lot of people think about when they're going to fill a role. It's you need to know this kind of software. You need to have this kind of skill. But attributes also are very important. And so,
Yeah.
if you're going to fill a sales role, the person needs to typically be an extroverted person with high energy, high verbal skill, and high assertiveness, and they can just continue to push and push and push and push. But like a software engineer is typically a much more lower energy, math focused, math attribute kind of person with more of an introvert. And so if your sales guy leaves in a software company and you say, okay, well, who should we have selling now? Oh, let's pick the guy that developed the product because he knows it better than anyone.
Yeah.
Except that he's not an extrovert and he's not high energy. He's not assertive. So he does the wrong attributes to go be the sales guy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think you should focus on attributes probably more than technical skills in a lot of different kinds of roles because they will stick with it better if it fits them. And you can
Yeah.
learn a skill, but you can't learn your attributes.
How would you describe the three of you? What are some of those key attribute differences
Yeah.
or roles that you guys play?
Yeah, we're different. So Greg is very cerebral and very thoughtful about things that are upcoming. And, he won't make a quick decision on big things. And when he does make a decision, he sticks with it, So, and he's very much a relationship guy, very much a guy that can read a room naturally. He can read a conversation. He can read a person and the body language. And like we've come out of meetings and he's like, I noticed the way this guy did this when you said such and such. Next time we're in that kind of thing, you might not want to phrase it that way. Or he notices these little things.
Yeah.
And so he's very much that kind of humanistic people person with a long strategic, long decision cycles and very analytical. Rob is very much, he's our COO. And man, that guy, he knocks it out of the park. He's just really good with the math, really good with operations, very quick and responsive. Makes it happen right now kind of a guy.
Yeah.
Perfect for that job. Self-educated. I mean, impressive.
Yeah.
And whatever it is he needs to be an expert at, he'll get a stack of books and be the expert. He's really good like that. And very quick on the decision cycles too. So he and Greg are different in that way. And so, And I'm probably somewhere in the middle, without the math skills that Rob has. I really like the leadership part of this. It's my favorite thing to be involved with in the company is the leadership program. It means more to me than any other part of the business.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's such a crucial piece that's hard to know in those early days. But it makes such a difference. As you guys have kind of evolved and as time's gone by, what are some of the things you've learned about maintaining those relationships between the three of you? Any tips? I think that's a big, people always joke that being an entrepreneur and having partners is like being married because it really is. I mean, it's the people I spend more time with, my partners, than any other people besides my wife and children. What are the things you've done to maintain that?
Well, I think respect is critical. And sometimes you don't always agree on, what that next course of action is going to be, what that next strategic direction is going to be, and when you have those disagreements, sometimes you just have to understand I'm not always going to get my way, and that's okay as long as I believe in my team. So there's something called the good idea cutoff point. I learned this from one of my previous commanders, a guy named John McCardle. We're in a room full of people who are specially selected, a lot of really smart people, a lot of really dedicated, hardworking folks in these teams. And so when you do mission planning in a special operations environment, a lot of the good ideas in the plan, it comes from the bottom up, because those are the people who are going to be going out there taking the risk. Very different than big Army, right? And so he said, when he came on board and took command, he said, I have this concept called the good idea cutoff point. And when we're in mission planning, we want all the good ideas. At some point, we're going to have to pick a course of action. And at that good idea cutoff point, when I make that decision, I need everybody to be on board, and we're all going to execute together on whatever that final plan is. And that good idea cutoff point happens in business all the time. And as long as we know when it comes, we don't get all wounded knee about it, it works out fine.
I love that idea. I'm stealing that idea. I'm going to use that with my team, because I think we struggle with that. We notice this with a lot of times with clients. I also own an agency that does marketing campaigns for hyper growth companies, and we notice that people like going back to ideation. They're like, oh, they have this idea, and then you get to the hard work of, casting and choosing who's gonna do what, and you're finalizing things, and all of a sudden that gets really, it's a lot of detail work. And I notice a lot of entrepreneurs who are our clients, they want to go back to that good idea. Like, oh, I have a good idea. Yeah. And it's like, no, we're past good ideas. Yeah. And I love that phrase of the good idea cutoff. Like, and I noticed that with PillCube too. We are going down a road, and then all of a sudden, we get this a lot with vendors where Walmart or Target will come and say, hey, do you guys have something like this? And we're like, no, and there's that temptation to say, we'll make it for you. Right. Because we want to please them and make them happy. Right. And so,
well, there's another one. There's a book called $1 Trillion Coach about this guy who was the coach for all the Silicon Valley, now billionaires. And Bill Campbell's the guy's name. And after he died, they all sort of got together and wrote a book about him. But one of his philosophies is that consensus decision making often leads to very, very mediocre decisions. And he said, you get all your engineers or your operations people, whatever they are, you get all these people in a room, and they've all got these ideas. And if you try to make a consensus out of it, it often does not end up in a great direction. The leader needs to be the one to make that final decision about direction, about what we're going to do, and get everybody all in on supporting it. Yeah. And, even if it wasn't your idea, we need you to be on board, because this is where we're going. Giddy up. Let's go.
I also wanted to ask, our podcast is about 30 minutes. So as we kind of come towards the end of that, you are doing some really cool things in this world to help those who are struggling and going through challenges. And I love that you guys have, it's still in your sphere of skill set and influence and what you know. Can you tell us about some of the things you're working on to help others?
Sure. We've had 2 Afghan young ladies living with our family for about the past year. When the Taliban took over Afghanistan, there was a young girl named Asma Paigir. She was 18 at the time, and she was stuck outside the gates of the Kabul airport with 150 fellow schoolgirls in 7 buses, and they were trying to get into the airport because they had a charter plane from their school, waiting to get them out. And the Taliban just kept turning them back over a period of 5 days, and they spent like 18, 20 hours a day on these buses sometimes. And it was late at night on a Friday. It was like 1 a.m, and the Taliban was starting to clear out everybody else, like all the civilians, like the witnesses. And she was feeling like it's about to get really bad for us. And she's texting her sister, Azada, who was in Nebraska. She had just finished her MBA in international banking and finance, and she's 24 years old. And Azada said, I'm going to try to find you some help. And so she had purchased LinkedIn Premium and facial recognition software, and she had gone on to LinkedIn and found people in the U.S. who had served with her father, who was a lieutenant colonel in the Afghan National Army in the infantry. Did a lot of time in combat, U.S. forces right by his side. And so she found some of these people and cold messaged them on LinkedIn, got in touch with them, and then got them in touch with one of our guys who we were over in Macedonia trying to prep to receive some airplanes of Afghan refugees. And so ultimately we connected the dots between Asma outside the airport and so one of us knew somebody at the Pentagon and got that information to the commander on the ground there of the 82nd Airborne Division. And they negotiated with the Taliban to get these 7 buses in. Except the Taliban had taken 3 of those girls. And so we went through that same process again. And Asma was very brave. She had, we said, you need to, our guy told him, send a map pin. Gino Garcia and Chris Sims were the 2 main guys that were dealing with this situation with Asma. They coached her through what to do. Send a map pin, take some pictures of everything around you without your flash on. And we had an interpreter, Soraya, who was talking to them in Dari so that they didn't give away they were talking to Americans. And because the Taliban had threatened them quite a bit. And ultimately, 4 or 5 days later, Asma is sitting in the Holiday Inn at the Dulles Airport. And I was texting in a group text and realized that she was there. So my wife and I got in my truck and drove up there, and we visited her every day for about 4 or 5 days. And she was supposed to be going to Canada when all the other girls are going to be staying here in the U.S. because she had a visa to Canada because she was going to be going to college there. She had applied. But the Taliban messed up her timeline, and school had already started. And her family's money that was going to pay for her college was gone. Taliban had control of everything. And her family was on the run, they were hiding because they were targeted, and she had escaped, and it was just a big mess. And we offered for her to come and stay with us, and she had all kinds of trauma and anxiety and fear about being safe. And we said, well, she said, can my sister come? That would make me feel safe. So her sister Azada came from Nebraska. We picked her up at the Dulles Airport, wrestled her away from IOM, the UN entity that was moving refugees. They are concerned about human trafficking and things like that. And so I need to let them know I'm a safe guy. And so I went through that process. And they lived with us for a year. Azada's still here. She's taking her drive. She's got her work permit. She's doing her driver's training, and she's doing job interviews. And Asma is in Virginia Tech studying computer science. And we are doing everything we can to be able to afford to keep her in college. And so part of that is a fundraising effort. Mercury One, Glenn Beck's organization, paid for a lot of things like all of their dental care. I mean, dozens of dental visits to Smiles for Centerville in Centerville, Virginia. And they took care of them really well. Asma had never been to a dentist before. And then Mercury One paid for her first semester at Virginia Tech. And we've raised about $18,000 so far on the GoFundMe to help keep her in college. And we just need to keep pushing on that. And so that's one of my main motivations for doing any kind of podcast is to try to talk about Asma's GoFundMe. And so it's, if you go to GoFundMe and type in Asma Pygear, that's ASMA, her last name is Pygear, Paigeer. Her little link will come up, and it's at about 18,000 right now. And we're working on getting her in-state tuition rates because right now it's out of state. So we're working on that. It's happening, I think, because she just got her asylum granted. Huge thing. And that should help with the in-state tuition piece. And so we got a guy who's volunteered to give her an apartment for the years going forward. They're right there in Blacksburg, Virginia. He's the cousin of my business partner, Kirk. And he owns a bunch of apartments around college campuses. So it's Team Asma. We're all chipping in. We're all helping. And we're asking everybody to join Operation Asma. Asma Pygear and on GoFundMe.
That is amazing. What an amazing story. Holy cow. Makes you count your blessings. Yeah.
Yeah. And I could talk for 3 hours and keep telling you things that just blow you away. But it's an amazing story, and they're both going to do so well here because they are hard workers, and they're persistent, and they're intelligent. And Azada, she's got her MBA in international banking and finance. She's going to do great here. Yeah,
that's incredible. Well, we'll include the link in the podcast so that people can go and donate and help out Asma.
Thank you so much, Jay. Operation Asma. Yeah.
Love it. Well, thanks so much for coming on and being a guest, and we really appreciate it. Thanks for Jess for making the connection, and thanks for sharing all of the wisdom and experience you've had as an entrepreneur. I definitely have a lot of things like, oh, I need to go reread that book. And The $1 Trillion Coach actually is on my list. Jess told me I needed to read it. So I'm going
Oh
to bump
yeah,
that up to the top.
yeah. I do a little coaching on the side just for some friends that run businesses, and that I've been through that book twice now. It's really good.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I need to do that. Well, thanks again. We really appreciate it. And yeah, best of luck
Thank
with everything this year for you guys.
thank you so much, Jay, and thank you for your support for asthma on this. I really appreciate it. Thank you. It means a lot.
You bet.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.